My wife handed me divorce papers like it was a grocery list. I signed nothing, then I asked her one question that made her start crying. My wife handed me divorce papers the way you hand someone a grocery list, like it was just another chore that needed to get done before bedtime, and the calmness in her face is the part that keeps replaying in my head, not the word divorce, not the threat of court, not even the money, just how normal she tried to make it. We live outside Raleigh, North Carolina. We have 2 kids, Tate is 8 and Ivy is 5, and our life is pretty average: work, school, errands, soccer sign-ups, arguing about screens, all the boring stuff people complain about and then secretly rely on because boring means stable. My wife's name is Maren. We have been together since our early 20s, married 9 years, and I honestly thought we were doing the normal long marriage thing where you go through seasons that feel dull and stressful and then you circle back. You remember you actually like each other, you plan a weekend, you try again. The last few months had been tense, but not divorce tense, more like tired tense, like 2 adults who are overloaded and snippy. And I kept telling myself we just needed a reset, a vacation, more sleep, less doom scrolling at night. The day she gave me the papers was a Tuesday. I remember that because Tuesdays are my earlier shift day, so I was home before the bus dropped Tate off. And Ivy had been home with a stomach bug the day before and demanded mac and cheese like it was medicine. So I was in the kitchen rinsing a pot while staring at the clock and trying to time everything. Maren walked in wearing her work badge still clipped to her belt, tote bag on her shoulder, hair pulled back like she hadn't even taken a breath between work and whatever decision she made. And she put a thick packet on the counter right next to the fruit bowl like it belonged there, like it was mail. I asked what that was, even though I already knew because you can see the layout of legal documents from 10 feet away, and she said it was paperwork. And she said it in the same tone she uses when she tells me we're low on paper towels. Then she pointed at the signature lines with one finger, neat and slow, and she told me it would make things easier if I signed and we kept it civil for the kids. There was no conversation before this, no sit down, no warning, no we need to talk, no I'm unhappy and I want to separate, just a packet and her acting like I was the one dragging drama into the room by blinking too long. I picked it up and flipped the first page and saw the word divorce, and I felt this cold rush in my chest, like my body was trying to lock down so I wouldn't do something stupid. The weird thing is I did not feel rage first. I felt embarrassment, like I was the last person at my own funeral to get the invitation, because she looked so prepared that it made me wonder who else already knew. I asked her what happened. I asked her when she decided this. I asked if this was because of the argument we had the weekend before about her mom inviting herself over again, and Maren shrugged, actually shrugged, and said she was done. She said she felt like a single parent living with a roommate, and she said it like it was a line she'd practiced, like she'd said it in the shower, said it to a friend, said it to herself until it sounded clean. That line hit me hard because I am not perfect, but I am present. I do drop-offs, I make lunches, I handle the insurance mess, I do bedtime most nights because Maren gets home later, I do dishes, I do homework checks. I have missed games sometimes because of work, but I am not absent. And hearing her call me a roommate felt like she was rewriting our entire life into a story that justified what she was doing. I told her I was not signing anything right now, and her expression changed fast like I had stepped off the script, and she said I always make things harder than they have to be. She said signing did mean I agreed with everything. She said it just meant I acknowledged it. She said we could do this maturely, and she said maturely the way people say behave yourself right before they do something nasty. I kept flipping pages because I wanted to see what she thought I was supposed to accept, and the packet was thick, too thick for a simple filing. It had sections about custody, about the house, about debts, about retirement accounts, and it had specific numbers filled in like she had been gathering information for a while. Maren watched my face the whole time, not with sadness, more like evaluation, like she was trying to see which page would make me react. I asked if there was someone else because that is where your brain goes when someone is this emotionally flat about divorce, and she did this tight exhale and said no, and she said I always need a villain. I told her I'm not looking for a villain, I'm looking for reality because I am standing in my kitchen holding divorce papers while our kids are about to come home. And she said this is reality, and she said she wanted primary custody, she wanted the house sold, she wanted a clean split, and she wanted it fast. Fast. She emphasized fast like it was the most important part, not fair, not careful, not gentle, just fast, and that sat wrong in my gut. Tate walked into the kitchen right then, backpack half open, and he asked why we were talking like that, and Maren's face changed instantly. She got warm and soft and told him everything was fine. She told him to wash his hands because dinner would be soon, and she smiled like she was hosting a normal Tuesday. Tate looked at me after she spoke, not at her, at me, because kids know which parent tells the truth with their face, and I forced a smile and told him we were fine, and I hated myself for lying to my kid, but I wasn't going to shatter his world in the kitchen while he still had school papers sticking out of his bag. When Tate left the room, Marin's face dropped back into that flat focus, and she told me again to sign, and she said the sooner we did this, the sooner we could keep things peaceful for the kids, and she said peaceful like a threat. I kept flipping pages, and then I saw something that made my hands go cold. There was a personal loan listed under my name, not ours, mine, with a balance big enough to make my stomach drop, and there was also a credit line listed under my name, again not ours, and it was dated within the last year. I stared at it and then looked at Marin and told her I didn't know what that was, and she didn't look down at the paper, she just said it was handled, and she told me not to worry about it. Not to worry about a loan in my name. I asked her what she meant by handled, and she got visibly irritated, and she said I always obsess over details, and I told her details are my credit, my identity, my ability to rent a place if we split, my ability to buy a car, my ability to provide for our kids, so yes, I am obsessing over details. She told me to stop making it dramatic and just sign, and I remember thinking this is the most backwards thing I've ever heard. She hands me a packet that can dismantle my life and I'm dramatic for reading it. I told her again I was not signing, and she raised her voice and said if I didn't sign, she would file anyway and the court would decide and it would cost more and I would have nobody to blame but myself. Then the thought I didn't want to touch finally came forward, because the only way you get debts in someone's name without them knowing is if someone used their information, and the only person who has full access to my life details is my wife. So I asked her one question, and I didn't ask it to be clever, I asked it because the room suddenly felt like it had a trapdoor under it. I asked her how many times she signed my name. I said it quietly, almost evenly, and the moment it landed, Marin froze like someone unplugged her. Her mouth opened and closed, her eyes glossed fast, and for a second she looked like she was about to snap at me, but instead she started crying, not a polite tear, real crying, shoulders shaking, breath catching, like her body reacted before her brain could pick a strategy. I just stood there staring because I expected denial, anger, counter-accusations, anything except instant collapse, and her crying felt like a confession even before she spoke. She tried to talk and said I was being ridiculous, but her voice cracked, and then she covered her mouth with her hand like she was trying to hold the sound in, and she cried harder. I asked her what she did, and she shook her head and said she couldn't do this right now, and she reached for the packet like she wanted to snatch it back, like she could rewind time if she got the papers out of my hands. I held onto it, not yanking, just holding, and she let go and backed up, crying and saying she was trying to keep our family afloat. That sentence made me feel sick because she said family while handing me divorce papers and hiding debt in my name, and I could not make those pieces fit together. Then she wiped her face hard like she was angry at the tears, and she said I wasn't going to take the kids from her, and she said it like she had been preparing for a custody war, like she had already decided I was an enemy. I told her nobody said anything about taking the kids, and she snapped that I would. She snapped that I always punish her when she messes up, and I was sitting there trying to understand what mess up meant when this looked like fraud. She went upstairs, shut the bedroom door, and left me in the kitchen holding divorce papers while my kids played in the living room like our house hadn't just shifted. Dinner still had to happen because life does not pause for betrayal, and I made mac and cheese and nodded at Tate's story about a class project and pretended my hands weren't shaking. Marin didn't come down to eat, she didn't sit with us, she stayed upstairs like she could hide from consequences behind a door, and I slept on the couch because I couldn't lie next to someone who cried like that and then refused to explain anything. I barely slept because every time I closed my eyes I saw those numbers and the word loan and the way she said fast, and my brain kept trying to solve it like a puzzle. Where did the money go? What else exists? How long has this been happening? In the morning, after the kids got on the bus, I opened my laptop and logged into our accounts, and I didn't do it like a spy, I did it like a parent trying to keep a roof over his kids' heads. I found a recurring payment labeled like a generic transfer, same amount, same day each month, small enough to hide in the noise of groceries and gas, but consistent enough that it had been going for months. I clicked it and it linked to a loan servicer I didn't recognize, and I felt that cold wave again because this wasn't just a line in a packet. It was real. It was pulling money out of our household while I thought we were just living paycheck to paycheck because that's how everything feels now. I called the servicer, verified my identity, asked about the loan, and the rep told me the balance and origination date, and the date hit like a punch because it was during a time when Marin and I looked normal. We went to a carnival, we took photos, we did life. I asked how it was opened and the rep said online, and she read the email on file, and it was not mine, it was Marin's second email, the one she always called her junk email for coupons and random signups. I hung up and just sat there because now I wasn't guessing, I knew. I went upstairs and knocked on the bedroom door, and Marin told me to go away, and I told her no. I told her the loan was tied to her email, and I asked her again how many times she signed my name. She started crying again and yelling through it that I didn't understand, that she was under pressure, that she was trying to prevent something worse, and then she said something that turned my stomach. She said it involved other people. I asked who, and she refused. She kept saying she couldn't say, and she kept saying I needed to sign the divorce papers so everything could be separated. And she said separated like it would magically wash my name clean. I told her I wasn't signing anything until I spoke to an attorney, and she screamed that I was trying to ruin her. And I told her she was the one who put my name on debt, and she went silent for a second like she realized she couldn't argue that part away. I scheduled an attorney consult the same day because I am not freehanding my way through divorce and identity theft, and the attorney told me not to sign anything, not even an acknowledgement, not even a receipt, nothing, and to start documenting everything. So that's where I was when I first posted this, sleeping on the couch in my own house, watching my wife move upstairs like a ghost, trying to act normal for my kids, and realizing the divorce papers might not have been about leaving me, they might have been about outrunning the questions before I could see what my name was attached to. Update 3 weeks later. 3 weeks have passed and I feel like I have been living inside a file cabinet because every day has been calls, forms, screenshots, hold music, case numbers, and then immediately switching gears to normal parent life like you can just turn off dread when the school bus arrives. I did not sign anything. I retained the attorney and I pulled my credit reports, and the first time I opened them I felt physically sick because there were more accounts than the ones in the divorce packet. Not an endless list, but enough to show a pattern, a personal loan, a revolving line, a store account I never opened, and one closed account that had been opened and paid down fast, which felt almost worse because it meant someone was cycling credit, testing what they could get away with. Each lender I called had the same theme: Marin's secondary email, Marin's phone number, and sometimes an older address from before we were married, like she was trying to keep the paperwork anchored to a past version of me. But my name and social were still the key, so it was all tied to my present life anyway. The more I pulled, the clearer it became that the divorce papers were designed to make me sign before I saw the full scope. Because the packet didn't include everything, it included enough to explain some missing money without revealing the entire shape, like she was controlling the drip of truth. Marin started doing this exhausting thing where she would admit one piece and then act shocked about the next piece, like she wanted me to believe she wasn't aware of the full extent, but she also couldn't explain why every account used her email. She kept crying and calling it a mistake, and then she would switch into cold mode and tell me I was overreacting. And the whiplash was horrible because it made me feel like I was dealing with two different people wearing the same face. The custody situation went sideways fast, not because I threatened her, but because she anticipated threat and tried to get ahead of it. My attorney filed for temporary orders, not as punishment, just structure, custody schedule, financial restraints, and a request that neither of us could open new credit during the proceedings. Because the attorney told me something that made me feel both validated and scared. She said people who lie about money often escalate when they feel exposed, and structure is what stops impulsive damage. When Marin was served, she panicked, and she started telling her sister and her mom and at least one mutual friend that I was trying to take the kids. And suddenly my phone was full of vague messages like please be civil and think of the kids. And it was surreal because I was literally still sleeping on the couch and packing lunches and trying to stop creditors from calling my workplace. And she was out there planting the idea that I was the danger. I didn't respond to the gossip, I just documented, because I realized this was not going to be a normal separation where people feel sad and then move on. This was going to be a story war where she needed me to look aggressive so she could look justified. Then the consequences hit my job, not dramatic firing consequences, but humiliating consequences. A creditor attempted a collection action tied to one of the loans, and I got a notice that referenced my employer. And it felt like a hand reaching into my life from outside and squeezing, because nothing makes betrayal feel more real than seeing your income threatened by something you did not do. After that, my attorney told me I needed to file an identity theft report and a police report, not because I expected someone to swoop in and fix it, but because lenders treat you differently when you have official reports, and because I needed a record that I did not consent. Filing the police report detonated whatever fragile control Marin was clinging to. She screamed that I was ruining her life. She cried that I was going to get her arrested. She said I was destroying the mother of my children. And she kept saying, "Why are you doing this to me?" And that phrasing made me want to put my head through a wall because I wasn't doing it to her. She did it to me. I was responding. She finally admitted more, not a clean confession, more like a spill. She told me her younger brother Devin was in trouble. She said it started with business debt, then became pressure, then became threats. And she said threats like she expected me to stop asking questions and switch into protector mode. I asked what kind of threats and she refused to say. She said it involved other people. She said numbing it would make it worse, and she said she did what she had to do, and the way she said it made my skin crawl because it sounded like she was trying to make fraud sound like bravery. I asked why she didn't come to me, why she didn't tell me and ask for help, and she said because I would have said no, and she said it like that justified everything, like my potential no made her yes correct. She admitted she tried to cover Devin with her own credit first. She admitted she maxed out, she admitted she took advances, and then she used my information because my profile was cleaner, and she said it like she was describing a tool, not a person. I asked if Devin knew she used my name and she swore he didn't. She said she was protecting me. She said she was protecting the kids, and I told her she used the kids' stability as collateral because if my credit collapses, our entire household collapses. Then she said the divorce was supposed to protect me, and I actually laughed not because it was funny, because it was insane, and I asked her how divorce protects me when the accounts are in my name, and she had no answer. A few days after that, Devin showed up at my house, and this is where my anger turned into something colder because he showed up like he expected access, like I owed him a conversation. I didn't let him in. I stood in the doorway and I asked him how much money went into his hands that came from accounts in my name. He looked down and said he didn't know the exact number, and then he started talking about how complicated it got, how he tried to fix it, how things spiraled, how Maren insisted, and all I heard was a man describing my identity like it was a sponge they used to soak up their mess. I told him my credit report doesn't care about complicated and my kid's future doesn't care about spiraled, and he got defensive and said Maren was trying to help and I didn't have to act like she was a criminal, and I told him she committed a crime and he went quiet. Then he tried a different tactic and said I was going to hurt the kids if I kept escalating, and I realized that is how this family operates. They use the kids as emotional shields to block consequences. Devin left and Maren accused me of humiliating him, and I told her he humiliated himself by letting his crisis attach itself to my name, and she cried and called me cruel, and then she tried to pivot back to the divorce papers like if she could get me to sign, she could regain control of the timeline. The court granted temporary orders, custody schedule, financial restraints, no new credit, and I felt a small layer of relief because at least now there were rules that didn't depend on Maren's shifting moods. Then the worst piece of documentation arrived, and this is the part that made everything feel less like panic and more like a plan. One lender sent transaction records showing that funds from one of the fraudulent accounts were transferred into a business account under Devin's company name, coded like a vendor payment. And seeing it in black and white made my stomach drop because it meant this wasn't just Maren taking a loan and throwing cash at a family emergency. It was money moving through channels. It was structured enough to leave a trail. I showed Maren and she tried to say she didn't know Devin used it like that, and I asked her what she thought would happen, that debt would evaporate, that lenders would forget, that a forged signature becomes a good deed if you feel stressed enough. That night she tried to bargain. She said if I dropped the police report, she would agree to a simple divorce, she would stop fighting, she would do anything, and she kept saying the kids need peace, and I told her the kids need stability and stability requires truth, and I wasn't trading my identity for quiet. The last thing in this update is what scared me, because it suggested this wasn't contained to Maren anymore. Collections letter arrived for an account I had never seen before, larger than the others, and when I called it had been opened online and listed my employer as verification, which meant someone used enough accurate information to make it look legitimate. And when I confronted Maren, she swore she didn't open that one, and for the first time I believed she might be telling the truth, because her face didn't look defensive, it looked startled. She admitted Devin had used her laptop sometimes, she admitted she had emailed him documents, she admitted she had sent him photos of paperwork because he needed help, and she said it like she was offering harmless context. And I felt my blood go cold because it meant my identity might have been passed around in their mess. So at 3 weeks out, the divorce is still pending, my credit is under attack, my wife is oscillating between crying and manipulating, her brother is circling like I'm the obstacle, and the divorce papers now look less like a breakup and more like a strategy to move fast before I could understand how many doors my name had been used to open. Update 2 months later. 2 months later, the house feels like a different building, not because the furniture moved, but because trust changes what air feels like, and when trust is gone, everything feels slightly unsafe, even silence. Maren is not living in the house anymore, not because I threw her out in a movie scene, but because the temporary orders and constant tension made it impossible, and she moved in with her mom, and we do custody exchanges in a public place with cameras, because my attorney told me to stop treating this like a private family disagreement when money and identity are involved. The fraud side moved slower than I wanted, but it moved, and every step forward created a new kind of ugly. A detective called me for a follow-up interview, asked about access, passwords, devices, whether I ever authorized Marin to open anything for me, and I told him no, and he said something that stuck. He said most people don't find out until the liar gets scared and tries to outrun discovery, and that word outrun made me think of Marin saying fast. Marin's attorney tried to propose a settlement that tied divorce terms to me dropping criminal reporting, and that was when I stopped believing any version of this where Marin was simply overwhelmed and made one mistake. Because if it was just a mistake, she wouldn't need me silent, she would need me forgiving. My attorney pushed back hard, and after that, Marin shifted into image defense. She began hinting to people that I was financially controlling, that she had to hide things from me, that she was trapped. And it was subtle enough that some people initially bought it, because a calm, crying woman telling a vague story gets sympathy in a way a stressed man holding paperwork does not. But disclosures came in, bank access records, joint accounts, spending patterns, and it showed she had full access. She had her own income, she had discretionary spending, and the pattern wasn't me controlling, the pattern was her choosing secrecy. The kid impact got worse before it got better, which is something nobody prepares you for. Tate started complaining of stomach aches on exchange days. Not dramatic, just quiet. I don't feel good, can I stay home? And Ivy started wetting the bed again after being dry for a long time, and the first time it happened she cried and said she didn't like when mommy cries and daddy looks mad. And I had to hold my kid and tell her she is safe while feeling like my own chest was caving in. Marin, during mediation, finally admitted the number of times she signed my name wasn't one or two, it was many, and she said she didn't even know the count, and she said it started with one emergency and then became routine. And routine is the word that made me feel the coldest, because routine means she had time to stop, time to confess, time to choose a different path, and she kept going. She also finally told the truth about why she shoved divorce papers at me with that grocery list energy, and it was uglier than I expected. She admitted she planned to sell the house quickly to pull equity, not to start over, but to dump money into Devin's situation and to pay down the accounts before anyone noticed. And she believed if she paid them down quickly enough, no one would question the origin, and the divorce could be framed as sad but clean with debts blended into the chaos, and she said it like she was describing a rescue plan. Hearing that made my skin crawl because it meant she didn't just betray me, she built a timeline around betraying me, and she needed my signature to make it move. I asked her if she ever planned to tell me, and she looked down and said she wanted to, but she couldn't. And I asked what she was afraid of, and she said Devin, she said the people around him. She said it wasn't safe, and she still refused to name specifics. And I started to understand her fear might not have been entirely imaginary. But it didn't excuse what she did, it only explained why she chose the worst option repeatedly. The detective later told my attorney, and my attorney told me that the investigation had indicators Devin was involved with a larger scam group, not just a failing business, and that multiple identities were likely used, and hearing that made me feel sick because it meant my name wasn't special, it was just convenient, and that is somehow even worse. Devin was questioned and he tried to blame Marin, he tried to frame her as acting alone, and that cracked something in Marin. She called me late one night, crying in a jagged way, and she said Devin was blaming her. She said his girlfriend was screaming at her. She said her mom told her to keep quiet. And she said she didn't know what to do, and I didn't comfort her the way I used to, because comfort in this situation felt like enabling, and I told her to tell the truth. She said the truth would ruin her family, and I told her her family already ruined mine, and there was a long silence, and then she admitted something that changed how I saw everything. She admitted the first time she used my name wasn't even for Devin, it was for herself. She works in admin for a small contracting company, and she told me she messed up an internal payment months ago, a misfiled invoice, a shortfall, and she panicked, and instead of admitting the mistake to her boss, she took a small personal loan in my name to patch the gap temporarily, planning to pay it back before anyone noticed, and she said she did pay it back, and she said it like she expected me to feel relief. All I felt was horror because it meant she learned she could do it, she learned it worked, she learned I wouldn't notice, and once she learned that, Devin's crisis didn't create the pattern, it expanded it. That was the moment my last instinct to save the marriage died, not because I stopped caring about her as a person, but because I realized she didn't just make a desperate decision under pressure, she practiced deception, she normalized it, she built a secret habit out of using my identity like a tool. Then she tried something that could have destroyed me in a different way, and I still feel sick when I type this. She filed for a temporary protective order, claiming I intimidated her during one of our confrontations, and when I was served, it felt like the floor vanished. Because a protective order can affect custody, housing, employment, reputation, everything, and I realized she was willing to brand me as dangerous if it helped her look like the victim instead of the perpetrator. The next day in court, the judge asked for specifics, and Marin's story was vague, emotional but vague, and my attorney presented our front door camera footage from the time she claimed I threatened her, and the footage showed Marin walking out calmly with her bag and her phone while I sat on the porch steps with my head in my hands, not following, not yelling, not touching her, not even moving toward her. The judge denied the order and warned her about making claims without evidence, and Marin started crying again right there. And outside the courtroom she hissed at me that I embarrassed her, and I stared at her because she tried to destroy my life and called the consequences embarrassing. After that, my attorney pushed for tighter language in temporary orders. No new credit, no changes to beneficiaries, no financial moves outside normal bills without disclosure. And the court agreed, and it was the first time in months I slept a little without feeling like the mail would explode my life again the next morning. So at 2 months out, divorce proceedings are moving, fraud proceedings are moving, my kids are showing stress in their bodies, my wife is trying to oscillate between apology and manipulation, and I am living in a state where every calm moment feels temporary, like a pause before the next shoe drops. Final update 7 months later. 7 months later, the divorce is finalized, and I waited to post this because I didn't want to write it while I was still reactive, and because some of the consequences took time to become real, and I also didn't want to post too much while the fraud case was active. The divorce outcome was not a dramatic victory or a total loss. It was a practical set of decisions designed to keep our kids stable, and to keep my finances from being used as a dumping ground for Marin's choices. I kept the house not because I won a war, but because the judge cared about continuity for the kids, school district, routine, and Marin received her share through a structured agreement rather than a quick cash payout. And that was important because it reduced the chance she could funnel a lump sum into Devon's mess, which the court didn't want to facilitate. Custody ended up shared, but with guardrails, clear schedules, no vague drop-ins, exchanges in a neutral public place for a while, and a clause that neither parent could introduce new financial obligations in the other's name, which sounds obvious until you live through the opposite. On the credit side, disputes take forever, and anyone who says just report it and it goes away has never lived through it, because you keep proving you didn't do something while the system treats you like you did until enough paperwork piles up. Some accounts were removed from my reports after investigation, some were reclassified as fraud, some required affidavits and follow-ups, and my score started to recover slowly. But it is not back to where it was, and that is one of the hardest parts because it means her choices follow me even after divorce, just in quieter ways. Marin faced legal consequences. Not a dramatic jail scene, but real consequences. She entered a plea arrangement that included restitution and probation conditions, and she has restrictions tied to financial activity for a period. And I didn't celebrate that because celebrating would mean I forgot she's my kid's mother. But I also didn't rescue her from it because rescuing her would mean teaching our children that you can destroy someone and then cry your way out. Devon faced consequences too, and that part got darker than I expected because the investigation uncovered more victims than just me, more identities used, more applications tied to the same small cluster of devices and accounts. And Devon wasn't the mastermind, but he wasn't innocent, and he is not welcome near my kids, and that boundary is one of the few things that feels non-negotiable. Marin and I never had a big emotional closure conversation. There was no scene where she explained everything and I forgave or I screamed. Because she isn't built for that, she apologizes in fragments, she cries, she retreats, she tries to negotiate, and then she acts like time should erase what happened. The closest thing to closure happened in a courthouse hallway on the day her plea was accepted, when she looked at me with swollen eyes and said she was sorry. And I asked her why she handed me divorce papers like it was a grocery list. And she started crying again and admitted she thought acting calm would make it real and manageable. And she admitted she was terrified that if I had time to think, I would see everything and she would lose control. I told her she didn't lose control because I asked a question. She lost control because she tried to hold our family together with lies and debt and fear. And Tate and Ivy deserved parents who tell the truth when things are falling apart. The kids are doing better, not perfect, but better. Tate's stomach aches faded once the schedule became predictable. Ivy still has occasional bedwetting when she gets anxious, but it's improving, and both kids ask more questions now, like they learned early that adults don't always say what they mean, and that breaks my heart in a quiet way because it means some innocence is gone. Co-parenting with Marin is procedural now, everything confirmed, everything in writing, everything documented, and I hate that because it feels less human, but the alternative is trusting someone who proved they can rewrite reality while looking you in the face. Sometimes I still replay the moment in the kitchen, not the yelling, not the crying, just the exact second I asked how many times she signed my name, because that question didn't fix anything, it just cracked the lie open, and the truth that spilled out changed every part of my life. But at least it stopped me from signing my own future away with a pen I didn't even realize she had already been using for me.